Hey, Scott James here from Intuitive Musician, and I thought I would share something from the Intuitive Musician Facebook group here on the YouTube channel so you can get a feel for the kind of stuff that we like to talk about in the group and hopefully to recruit you to join us. So this is a group for intuitive musicians. That's Myers-Briggs Intuitives. If you're not sure what that means, I'll put a link in the description where you can find out. It's intuitivemusician.com/test. You can find out what it means to be an intuitive and if you are one. The group is for musicians. You don't have to be a musician to join. If you're just a personality type junkie who likes music, then you might find it interesting. But keep in mind, this is going to be centered around musicians and things that they're going to find interesting. We like to talk about any kind of deep conversation that intuitive musicians are going to be interested in. So that's pretty broad. But of course, we do get into the nuts and bolts of personality type too. I like to take requests for people who want to get my 2 cents on someone's personality type and have discussions about this sort of thing. And a lot of times I like to make videos in response. So I'm going to post a video here, a response that I gave to a question about Chris Cornell's personality type. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, if you want to join us, you can join at facebook.com/groups/intuitive musicians. I'll put a link to that in the description that you can click on. Also, I reference a couple of video examples here. I'm going to put the links to those videos in the description. So I think you have to pop open the Show More tab, and you can click on those to see the examples that I'm talking about. Now, if you join us, I just ask that you come with the spirit of contributing to the discussion. We don't want people coming in who are just there to tell everyone that they're wrong about who they think someone's personality type is or whatever. We want to have mature discussion and we want to have interesting conversations. So come in with the mind to contribute and hopefully we can have some really good discussion, and I'll see you in the group. Cheers. Hey everybody, so we got another question, this one from Rachel Moore. Hi Rachel. Rachel posted, or commented rather, on a post about Chris Cornell, who I think, as we all know by now, unfortunately passed away yesterday. Rachel said, I've been reading he might have been INFP. Thoughts? So I would agree that introverted feeling, which is INFP's primary function, is a very present and important part of his personality, him as a person and as an artist. I don't think it was his primary function, though. I type him as INTJ. So when I watch Chris Cornell in interviews, he appears to me to be coming at things from a more detached, analytical, cerebral perspective, which is indicative of introverted intuition primary. The flip side of introverted intuition primary also fits for me, and that's extroverted sensing as an inferior function. So extroverted sensing inferior makes it very difficult for INJs to kind of regulate and control their things in the sensory world. So INJs are tend to be very much in their heads, constantly, the brains are constantly trying to put things together and figure out unconsciously how things fit together and kind of showing patterns to them. And because they're doing that all the time, it's especially enjoyable for them to go into their bodies and into the moment. That kind of shuts off that rambling in their heads. And the way that they tend to do that usually is through some kind of immersive sensory experience. So that can be it can be loud music, hot showers, sports, and it can also be drugs and alcohol. And unfortunately, Chris Cornell suffered from issues with drugs and alcohol throughout his life. He did a lot of drugs when he was younger, And that may have contributed to, you may have had lingering effects that contributed to him ending up on antidepressants and ultimately being in the state he was in when he committed suicide. So INFPs, they, of course, can also have issues with drugs and alcohol. It's not as common, though, for it, for them to really go off the rails with it. Of course, there are some people who've been badly abused. So these things can, can happen with INFPs, but much more likely with an INTJ. I've just quickly found a couple of interviews here to illustrate some of the difference between INFP and INTJ that I'm, picking up on here. One of the videos is Eddie Vedder, who's INFP, and I'm going to contrast that with an interview from Chris Cornell. So with Eddie Vedder, you really get the sense that he is relating to people through his emotions, through personal experience, and through kind of just the, he's very attached to the human element, and I think this really comes out in the way that he speaks. With Chris Cornell, again, he seems to come at things from a more detached analytical perspective to start with. I mean, you can pick up on some introverted feeling, but I think what you see is mostly introverted intuition. So this interview that I'm going to link to below this video, in it, you can, I think you can observe this. So the first thing that they talk about in the interview is how, Chris Cornell is kind of distracted by the interviewer's tattoos. He sees one tattoo that doesn't seem to fit to him. And this kind of speaks to how INJs try and understand the world. They're always trying to see what's the larger pattern here, how do things fit together. So him seeing like, okay, this doesn't fit, it makes his brain go, what's going on here? And you can hear as they talk that this is kind of this is consistent with how his perspective kind of seems to be throughout. He's talking about things mostly from an objective perspective. Another thing that I would say is a kind of general statement about INTJs and INFPs. The arts, like music, of course, it brings out people's feeling processes. So it really brings out introverted feeling in an INTJ much more than you would see it in, the stereotypical INTJ. More than an INTJ scientist or an INTJ who works in finance. So they're going to look like very different people, I think. INTJ artists are much more likely to appear like perceivers or feelers. So I think that there's some overtyping that happens where INTJs are typed as INFPs. And I think that's because, as I mentioned, INTJs can look more like INFPs. And I also think that there are more INTJ artists than most people would think. So from profiling a lot of musicians, a conclusion that I've come to is that a disproportionate percentage of introverted feeling primaries, so ISFP and INFP, and introverted intuition primaries, INFJ and INTJ, become musicians. So I think, we would all recognize that there are a lot of INFP and ISFP musicians. However, I think there are a lot more INTJs who are than most people realize. And I think this is because Introverted intuition, it's a very unconscious, deep thinking process. So it can be very difficult sometimes for INTJs to really to formulate their thoughts to a point where they can express them in a satisfying way. So if you contrast this with, say, introverted thinking primaries, ISTPs and INTPs, they're usually very logically quick by comparison. So they can usually justify their positions more quickly. With INTJs, they have to, they have to spend more time formulating their thoughts. So in day-to-day life, this can be frustrating. A lot of times they feel like they don't get to really express themselves and get things out in real time in day-to-day life. So because of this, a disproportionate percentage of them will turn to the arts, because that gives them the opportunity to spend all the time they need to formulate some kind of a satisfying expression. So those are a few thoughts on Chris Cornell. If you have any thoughts or follow-up questions, then just go ahead and post them in the thread and I will respond. Thanks.